Whether you're taking videos on your iPhone, or indeed any other smartphone for that matter, for personal use, perhaps even a basic business video, or maybe you want to get into hobby iPhone filmmaking, there are a handful of fundamental videography and filming tips you need to know. And in this video on iPhone filmmaking tutorial for beginners, you will learn all about how to get the most out of the native iPhone camera app for recording videos. The native iPhone camera app with its inbuilt video mode has many limitations, and I definitely recommend upgrading to a dedicated app for recording videos, which I'll touch on a little bit later in this video. But for now, let's learn how to use this classic iPhone app for videoing. I confess to using the native camera app most of the time when snapping quick videos or photos for most everyday use. It's only when I plan to make a semi-professional or just a generally more polished video will I use a dedicated video recording app such as Filmic Pro. One of the reasons I mostly use the standard app is because often I want to take a video in the moment and be able to hit the record button ASAP before the moment is gone. For example, when a Lambo is driving past or a cute cat or dog is about to do something funny. So the quickest way to get recording is to whip out your iPhone, wake up the screen, push and hold the camera app, tap video, choose your orientation, whether it be vertical or horizontal, and hit record. If you can get really good at this, you can actually be up and recording in about 2 to 3 seconds from when you whip it out of your pocket. There is a quicker way to get up and recording, and that involves programming the back tap on the iPhone to start recording a video. And I'll show you how to do that in this video right here. With this method, you can actually be up and recording in as little as 1 to 2 seconds from pulling it out of your pocket. Okay, now that we've got this app open and ready to hit record, let's cover the controls you have in this app, albeit very limited. And today we'll just cover the video mode, not slow-mo or time-lapse mode, as I'll save those for a different video. This is a very basic camera app for recording video with not many controls, as I mentioned, but we will break down the controls into 2 modes. First, full auto, and second, semi-auto. Before we cover these though, let's take a look at the display. On the right, we can switch between the different shooting modes including pano, portrait, photo, video, the one we'll be focusing on today, slow-mo, and time-lapse. Next, depending on how many rear-facing camera lenses your iPhone has, you will see either 3 or 2 numbers displayed here, or none if your iPhone only has 1 lens at the back. The 2.5x represents the zoom lens, the 0.5x represents the wide-angle lens, where the 1x represents the standard lens. This button here switches between the forward-facing or selfie lens and the rear-facing lens group. Down the bottom right, you can click to get into your camera roll or just see your most recent photo or video. The top left here allows you to change between the frame rate and resolutions. On later iPhones, we can change between 24, 30, and 60 frames per second, and from HD, that's 1920 by 1080 pixels, and 4K, which is 3840 by 2160 pixels. I'll come back to when you should adjust these settings a little bit later on. Coming down, we have a small arrow here which will appear if you have a later model iPhone. This gives you access to a couple of manual video camera controls, which we'll also come back to a little bit later. Down the bottom left, we have the auto flash toggle / indicator. Older iPhones will have the flash controls at the top next to the record duration timer. If you are running a newer iPhone, you will sometimes see either a green or orange dot here. If you want to know what those mean, I've done a YouTube short video on that, which you can see right here. So check that one out. Now, let's talk iPhone video recording in full auto mode. This is the mode you're most familiar with and is likely the one that you use all the time. It's great for when you just want to grab that moment. You hit record and point and shoot without having to think. Use this mode in normal daylight filming conditions without any harsh shadows, when you don't have a backlit subject and don't have a spotlit subject. And if you don't know what these last two are, I'll explain shortly. So there's not much else to this mode other than deciding if you want to use the flash or not. But the flash controls can be a little confusing, so we'll cover that last. There is a term in video and photography called exposure. It's very important. Camera exposure is the overall brightness or darkness of an image. More specifically, it's the amount of light that reaches the camera sensor when a video is being recorded. The more you expose the camera sensor to light, the lighter your image will be overall. You can control the exposure by adjusting any combination of the iris of the lens, the shutter speed of the camera, and the ISO or sensitivity of the sensor. I'll save discussing these 3 variables for a later video, but in this mode, the camera automatically controls the image's exposure so that it is not too dark or not too bright overall. In this mode, if you were to point the camera at a bright window, it would darken the scene so that the image wasn't too bright. And if you point it at a darker spot, the camera will brighten the scene so that you can see the detail in the shadows. So the camera pretty much decides how bright or dark to make the image for correct exposure. If you want to take a little bit more control of your composition, you'll want to shoot in semi-auto mode. This will allow you to control both the brightness and focus of your composition. Use this when you have a challenging lighting situation and your subject is either too dark or too bright and the automatic exposure isn't quite getting it right. Or if you want to focus on a particular subject when doing a close-up. To do this, tap the screen where your subject is. The camera will adjust exposure and focus for your subject. Or if you're doing a close-up and you want to tell the camera which part of your composition to focus on so that it's not out of focus or blurry, you can just tap again like before. You can also tap and hold until you see the AE/AF lock appear. This means that the auto exposure and auto focus is locked onto the spot that you choose. That now means that if you were to move the camera from pointing to a dark scene to pointing to a bright scene, the exposure and focus wouldn't change. It would be set on what it was for the dark scene. So this can be used, say, if you're filming someone in a dark room with a bright background, known as a silhouette. It means the camera will keep the person's face bright and not darken the scene due to the bright background. Note that all the detail in the background is lost because you're telling the camera to show the detail in the shadows and the whites become completely blown out. The opposite effect of this is a spotlit subject, and that is when the subject is very bright and the background is dark. If after locking your exposure on your subject, or you're shooting in full auto mode and you still feel that the scene is a little dark, you can tap the little arrow, then press the plus and minus button. This is called auto exposure shift. It is essentially you telling the camera that after it has decided what exposure there should be for the scene, you want it to add a little bit of extra brightness. Likewise, if you feel your scene is actually too bright, you can dial down the auto exposure shift here. And there is an indicator in the bottom left here that tells you how good your exposure is, according to what the camera thinks. The closer the yellow indicators are to the center, the more the camera thinks that the exposure is correct. To be honest though, if you're at the point where you want to take full control of your exposure and are playing with these settings, it probably means you are ready for a dedicated video recording app, such as Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro is regarded as one of the better video recording apps on iPhone, and I'll do a video tour of this app also. Let's move on to flash control. Now technically it's a video light because a flash is generally just that, one flash, but we'll call it a flash nonetheless for the purpose of this video. The flash mode is kind of confusing, but I'll do my best to explain it here. This button toggles between no flash and auto flash. In no flash mode, the flash won't come on, obviously, but in auto flash mode, if the camera thinks the scene is too dark, it will turn on the flash, but only upon hitting the record button. And you can see in advance if the camera wants to do this because it will highlight yellow here, telling you that the scene is too dark. Note that when you do hit the record button now, the flash will come on and stay on for the duration of the record. There's actually no way of turning it off during recording in this app. Likewise, if you move from a bright area to a dark area in auto flash mode, the flash won't come on when you enter that dark area because you've already hit record. Overall though, this feature suits someone that is more comfortable filming in full auto mode and just wants to let the camera decide when to do things so that you don't have to worry about the controls at all. If you want to have a bit more of a say with when the flash is used, then you want to tap again this little arrow, then you can tap the flash button. Now on older iPhones, this is just a flash icon next to the record duration timer. You have three choices here: flash auto, flash on, and flash off. Flash auto is exactly the same as what we've just covered, and flash off again is obvious. Flash on bypasses the auto flash and just tells the camera to turn it on. As before though, you will need to decide this before hitting record because you can't turn the flash on even via this manual control during recording. Coming back to resolution and frame rate. Generally these days it's always good to shoot in the highest resolution that your camera offers because there is simply more detail in the recordings, particularly if you're looking at doing some video editing on a computer later on and want to have more flexibility. However, the file sizes of 4K recordings are much larger than that of HD. So if you're concerned with the storage space on your iPhone or want to keep your file sizes down because you have a slow video editing computer, you might want to shoot on HD. With regard to frame rates, I won't go into it too much here because this is quite an advanced setting. Choosing between frame rates either 30 or 60 frames per second in HD or 24, 30 or 60 in 4K matter if you're looking at doing some video editing on your computer later on. If you are shooting sport or fast action and you want to convert your videos into semi-slow motion in the edit, you will want to shoot at 60 frames per second. And if you're looking for that more cinematic look, you want to choose 24 frames per second here. However, if you're going for that more cinematic look, you'll most certainly want to be using something like Filmic Pro. Which iPhone are you filming on? Maybe it's time to upgrade. And with the iPhone 13 coming out soon, I'm sure you could pick up a great bargain on the iPhone 12. So take a look at this video to see a comparison of all the camera specs between the whole range of iPhone 12 models.